Hello and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Girls Corner Real Estate Edition. My name is Joan Wawero, your host today. I am a real estate professional and I'm here with these amazing ladies. And to my right is
Christabel Ojok, a real estate professional as well, co-founder of Rentscore, and I'm super passionate about affordable housing. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Happy to have you.
Thank you.
And to my left,
Lucy Throw the Realtor, as you all know me, I'm quite excited that you're taking over my channel today. But yeah, we are here for yet another exciting episode. For those guys who are very new about what you're saying now, this is just us meeting to share little bits on our day-to-day experiences in the market. And yeah, thank you so much for accepting to be here today.
thank you. And thank you for having us. I'm very excited to hand back the mic to you and this chair of hosting. You do it so naturally. But thank you for the opportunity to get to do this. So today I am wondering, it's been a month since we last sat together, had tea and chatted a bit.
Yeah.
What has been the highlight of your month?
I let Lucy go first. Because she's looking at me.
Yeah, you just did mention it's been a month since we met, right? But then I know our viewers will be like, where is that episode? So let me just say, April has really been tough for me.
That's the highlight. The dog
It has really been tough for me. I think as an entrepreneur, nothing really prepares you for what's to come, And yeah, we shot an episode that has not aired out. But then again, I always look at problems. I look at the positive side. What can we do better? And if I may say, April is 1 month that, having systems in place, having a good team in place really hit home. I know it's necessary, but then over what has happened in my organization this month, I think I'm now like a big advocate of, if you're starting out, have your systems in check first. It's not a luxury, it's a survival tool. Yeah.
And we must give you your flowers. You opened your office, was it earlier this year?
Yes, January.
In January.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a learning curve and there's so much to be learned, so much to be done, and you're doing well. Let's give you your flowers. You're doing very well. We started this podcast still this year, so there's a lot rolling on, and there's a lot that you have on your plate, aside from everything else that you do on a day-to-day basis. So you're doing well.
Well, it's interesting enough because at times it never hits home that at least you're doing amazing.
Somebody should tell you.
Someone telling you.
Yeah, I think we should be telling each other more, because I think as women sometimes we forget to give ourselves the recognition that we've done something.
Go back to my highlights for month of April. I think one of the things I've come to realize, I'm not a patient person, but this profession has really humbled me. April was our month. I always say real estate deals are deals once the signature has been appended and deposits have been paid, right? So I had a situation where we walked through the journey with this client from, I think, February?
Last year.
This year. So by the start of April, I knew that was a closed business, right? And then, unfortunately, you always get these kind of situations where a deal will pull out because of either the tenant or the seller. I mean the buyer. But this time it was a landlord on the receiving end, where I'm bringing money to you.
Yeah.
And then he says, I'm not keen on renting my house anymore.
Oh.
Yeah.
They just
And this
changed
time,
their mind.
we had done everything. The client is just waiting for documentation. right? And this is where now your skill comes in, skill set to understand what is the right thing to do. You know, you can't keep on pushing and pushing or pestering. If you don't want the money, that's okay. You can go back in the market.
That is good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, you've done all the work.
I know. So I think that was like my first ever to happen, because it happens on the other side of the business,
Yeah.
the demand side of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So I just, I teach people tactics to negotiate. I went back to ask myself, what's the best tactic, methodology can I apply here? The client told me, I want that house.
So now you have to convince.
I have to
The
convince the landlord. And remember, from the profile of how I know him, money is not an issue for the landlord. So yeah, so I was asking myself, is it that he's in a phase where perhaps he doesn't want to tire to do renovations, so let me give him time to like calm down, And true to the point, I took some time off the deal. I went mute on him, but then I ended up like just managing my clients, and I realized there's something else I didn't do. So I applied, and there are a couple of other units within the development that needed to be rented. So I went back and asked him, if it's the money, I can get you another client. And you gave, if it's the money, because now he came back. Yeah, because he didn't tell me that the offer was low. Here's the thing, the house was in the market for quite some time. So I told them, if we get it at this price point, can you take it? They said yes. So I went back and told my client, let's offer this. The client is willing to take. Only to realize now, after I proposed that, it was a price point that he wasn't comfortable with. And he was just accepting to test if there are people who are willing to pay that amount. So he ended up saying, okay, fine, let's have a deal. So I went back. Fortunately, when I always say when you're doing your marketing fact sheets, you need to put a price point to allow for a bit of negotiation. So I went back and told the client, we have to come back at the price that I had indicated on that, so the client can accept. And he said, it's fine, because that's what you had proposed to me. I'm willing, I can come in at that. And that's how I ended up. After 3 weeks of just going quiet, thinking about it, thinking about the strategy, we ended up even having coffee with the landlord. It was such like a learning experience for me, because I have this thing in me. I don't push deals. I know when to say no. But this time I was like, I'm not saying no. This landlord needs money. Why is he not taking this money? It could be the incentive, the motivation of the amount offered. So yeah. So let me say the highlight of April for me was the art of mastering your strategy.
A lot had to come into play to just be able to first identify what the issue is. And I mean, some of these things are not taught in classrooms. You have to be in the field and in the market to be able to know and to deal with people. Yeah. Oh wow, that's quite interesting, Chris.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of one. Mine is it's not related to work.
Yeah.
So, so you guys know I do calisthenics, and I have a coach. So there's a particular skill, because what happens is, as with any coaching, you start small and then of course gradually you progress. So there's a particular, should I call it like a move or a skill that I was trying to harness, and I found it was like I made it like it was possible for me to do. So it's that particular, let me call it a move, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's called skin the cat.
Okay.
So what happens is we use the rings. You guys know rings? Of course, we'll put like sort of like a description or an image so that guys are able to visualize.
Yeah.
But you have the rings. So what you do, you jump up and then you go back. You put your legs back and then you don't hit the ground. Then you come back. So you're supporting yourself
Oh
with
my
your
goodness, that sounds so difficult.
We need to actually go and have a look and see
yes.
it.
So you need like a
Yeah.
lot of upper body strength to be able to do that. So I was able to do it. Like for the longest time, when he even told me, I was like, oh, you know, I can't do this thing. I was like, no, try again. So when I did it, and I was able to. I did it successfully. I did it so many times. I was like, oh my gosh! So now I've unlocked it.
Yeah.
So now it just gets better and better.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that was
Congratulations and well done. I'm sure you're
Thank
so proud of yourself. You have to show us. I'm
Yeah.
trying
I
to
know.
picture what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's not working.
know,
It's
I
not
know,
working.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yours?
Yours?
Mine. Well, mine isn't really work related. Okay, sort of. It kind of is. We had the long Easter holiday. I finally got a chance to take a long break, so I took a few days off before Easter, and then Easter rolled up. So, you know, just a lot of rest, spending time with family, and, you know, catching up with friends. It was really nice. It felt like that's how, you know, this is how Easter, you know, this is how Easter should be, like a long
Absolutely.
1 week of just no calls, no nothing. It's just family, resting, friends, you know. Yeah. So that it's been a long time, and I've been wanting to just take a break. And the first 3 months, I'm sure I've mentioned that before, were really a roller coaster. There was a lot going on at work, just generally life, you know, trying to make sure that the New Year's resolutions, you know, you set your goals and you're there aiming to hit the target, and the Q1 is gone. So
Yeah, on that
Yeah,
note, have you
April was-
reviewed your goals for Q1?
My
Not
goals
yet.
are here. My goals are here.
they're here in your
Well,
mind.
yeah. For some reason this year I actually didn't write them down, but I know what I'm working.
Yeah.
Actually, there are two key things that I'm working on.
Mhm.
Okay, one is within my control. The other one, Lord Jesus,
Prayers.
it's only God. But so far He's been coming through. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
Good,
so just
good.
good. So yeah,
Have you done your Q1?
Yes, in 2 areas of what I mapped out for myself. Yeah. Yeah, as you're saying, some you have control, some you don't, and
true.
that's the nature of life at times. But I always like this year I'm so intentional. If I do something so small, I appreciate myself. Like I'm so happy that I've done it. You know, just being intentional to move a step ahead in what you had planned for yourself. Yeah, like this, what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember I just called you guys. I'm like, oh, I'm thinking of something. Are you guys willing to jump? Oh, I'm like, okay, fine. So this was one of the areas that I evaluated. I was like, we're good.
Yeah, tick. And well done. And it's such a nice thing to just come together and just, you know, have a chat, talk about work, talk about life.
yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of, I know, Lucy, you do a lot of sales when it comes to gated communities, and you see the lifestyle around the gated estates that have been popping up for quite some time. And there's all of this hype that we see on social media. Is that just hype? Do you think that's just hype, or it's, you know, there's actual demand for this kind of development?
That's a really good question, actually. I would say both. There's real demand, and there's still some hype. Because what social media does, it's amplify the demand. Okay? And if a developer is not keen, they could actually now, because everybody now is looking for a lifestyle, kind of a living. You know, you want a place where you're doing the work, play, young families and all that.
Yeah.
If I look around Nairobi,
Yeah.
the satellite towns, I would say there's real demand and there's real delivery of, you know, a product that is serving the purpose of lifestyle estates. If I look at Athi River, Kiambu, I look at Kitengela, there are people who are living quality life in those gated communities, you know, and good enough that the government has made it easier for guys living in the satellite towns to get to the employment, you know, segments in Nairobi. Because some areas, the demand does not really go the direction of lifestyle estates, right? This is like where people need a given lifestyle of living. It's just not a roof, right? But then also, where I say there's real demand is because we're seeing a shift of the middle incomers thriving in areas where they're looking for some sort of lifestyle. Okay? Now, I want to just highlight what I'm seeing on social media vis-a-vis what is on the ground. There is creativity in selling off-plan projects.
Yes. Yes.
A lot of creativity. And this is where, when they are marketing, they will give you a whole curated
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know, kids entertainment, gym, you know, well equipped. In fact, they put a well equipped gym, you know, heated pools, a clubhouse. They will tell you even there are some shops, you know. I mean, it's all good. What I ask myself is, because I have experienced it through my clients, they have been handed over, but then some of these facilities are not functional. Okay? Which takes me to, you could see a lot of high people pushing off-plan projects on social media, but then also they could be testing if people are receptive to their product.
Yeah, but now what came first?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as an expert, you ask yourself, did these people go into get clarity on what to build, what can be sustained with the infrastructure in place? Because let's be honest, we're all saying, can this area, especially some of the areas that we are seeing an oversupply, is the infrastructure stable enough
Yeah.
to sustain this development in the long term?
Most of the time, no, you know, I don't think people have done that kind of, you
But
know.
then a lot of buyers, it's the hype of social media, they get too emotional, they buy.
Yeah. Which speaks to somebody really needs expert advice. So before you buy property, real estate, don't just go for the marketing. Of course, anyone who's trying to sell you something will hype up the positives and really downplay the negatives. So for you to make an informed decision, get an expert to give you that expert advice so that you make the correct decision. So that even you know that, okay, here, like you gave us a very good point some time back where you said about there are about 80,000 units coming up in Westlands.
8,000.
8,000 units
Yeah.
coming up in Westlands.
Yeah.
And there's already a huge supply of 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom units already in Westlands. So now what happens to that market? You know, what happens to the Airbnb business that has been there? And you see, of course, not to try to get into politics, but you see with Donald Trump, a lot of these experts left the country. And there's, you know, these are the people who come for short stay, long stay, you know, they want a furnished and serviced apartment. So, I mean, there's all of that to look at. I don't know what you have seen in your area when it comes to the same question that Lucy was tackling.
Yeah, on my end, I have to say that I think on the positive side of it is that if a development, those gated communities are well executed, then it becomes really exceptional and outstanding.
Yes.
And a good example would be Runda 5-Star Paradise, done by AMS Properties. Absolutely beautiful.
It works.
It's a really well designed, and the thought process around it. So they even like where you have what Lucy, going back to what Lucy was talking about in terms of the social amenities.
Yeah.
So they do have there's a clubhouse, there's a well-equipped gym, there's a nice swimming pool. They even have a tennis court.
Oh wow!
You know, like I would literally be living there on a daily.
Sure.
That tennis court
yeah.
was it for me. Like if I was looking at buying that development, the tennis court sold. Immediately sold.
Done.
And it's also very well executed.
Yeah.
So I don't know, frankly speaking, if they have challenges within the development. But as with any other development, we may have maybe one or two things. But frankly speaking, in terms of how they've done it, how they executed it, I know what most people may not necessarily know is that it actually takes a really long time.
Yeah.
From the point of ideation to,
Yeah.
coming up with the concepts, to doing your feasibilities, market research, seeking approval, sourcing for financing,
Yes.
developing, because they had to do it in phases, selling, and then for it to be what we're seeing today, that has taken time. I think probably about 5 years, 7
Yeah,
years. It's
it
taken a
takes time.
really long time.
Yeah.
But yes, that's a good. That would be one of the positive outcomes if a
Yeah.
development has been well
Yeah.
executed.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
good, great. I mean, you can see the progress of how these things go, and of course, there are positives and negatives to certain things. And
Yeah.
unless somebody is in the market and able to pinpoint some of these things, there are some products that have worked.
Yes.
There's some real estate, lifestyle estates that have worked, and there's some that have failed for several reasons. And this makes me wonder, and maybe Lucy, you can tell us what your take is on this. How has your view changed when it comes to the matters to do with legacy, and issues to do with when it comes to real estate? How has your view changed?
I thought legacy is what people are left knowing about you once you leave,
Yeah.
But then, when you look at it keenly, legacy is what you actually do when you're here. The impact of your knowledge, the impact you give people that goes beyond you.
Yeah.
For me, that's legacy.
Yeah.
In the real estate context, I would talk of someone now, we just talked about 5-star Paradise, right? That's a development that a lot of investors are satisfied.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no like someone who is saying, oh, I lost money here, or the developer was very genuine, very authentic, delivered to the promise. That's a legacy.
Yes.
It's what you're remembered for when you're still here, not when you leave. Which takes me to now, in terms of wealth.
Yes.
I did highlight systems in businesses and wealth as well. Originally, I thought, like now we're talking about, it's just land, possession, money. But honestly, that can just be wiped out in a few years or even a month if you don't have structure, you don't have a system, and you don't have like a culture of how you need to do things. So even when you're developing in real estate, you need to ask yourself, what systems am I putting in place? What structure do I have? Because those systems will work for you even when you're not present. And they will push your wealth to the next generation. So I feel like looking at legacy, it gives you a lot to think about wealth, a lot to think about your journey in real estate. And this is not something that people will tell you.
No, no. And even for you too, as you run your businesses, I'm sure you're putting those structures in place such that you don't need to be physically there for things to move and run. And in such a way that, people who build those companies that have been passed on from generation to generation, they've been made public and all of that, that is such a huge legacy that you leave as a founder of a business that has given so many families have been able to put food on their table. I mean, food on their table because somebody created an organization, in your case, a real estate business that has been able to help people in just more than your immediate family and yourself. I want to move to you, Chris, and I know you're in the affordable housing space, and we've been hearing a lot about the buzz about housing levy. What is it? What is it that people need to know about it that they probably haven't really gotten to find out or learnt about it? And how is that different from how does that come into play when it comes to affordable housing?
Okay. So, first of all, if you earn a salary here, No one is happy in terms of how you look at your payslip and every day it's
Yeah.
But in a nutshell, so the affordable housing forms part of the Agenda 4, which was part of the 4 pillars from the previous regime, and then it was just a continuation. It's a continuation with the current regime in place. So the thing is, in terms of how much is deducted, that's 1.5%. There's a whole lot of back and forth, but I believe right now we've settled at 1.5% of your gross salary. So the higher you earn,
The more you pay.
the more you pay, which is it's painful.
The pinch.
But the whole idea behind it is so obviously the government is able to have like a pool of funds, and they should be able to use this in terms of like now supply of affordable homes. But then there's still obviously some gray areas which a lot of citizens are not happy about.
Yeah.
For example, in terms of the reality is not everyone is going to be able to access an affordable home, even if you actively contribute towards it. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Then there's also in terms of like now, so sort of like gray areas. For example, so yes, you've contributed it, let's say for a period of 7 years. Then what happens next? So in terms of I believe the challenge is within like the framework of it in terms of like how ideally it should be executed. But the whole idea of people being able to access and own affordable homes is not necessarily like a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just that the execution. So certain systems and structures need to be put in place. And everyone, like a lot of thought leaders within the affordable housing space do have different ideas in terms of how that can actually be manifested. It's just that now obviously the government has to be able to, they need to be receptive as far as those solutions are concerned. What I also need to mention is when you look at that affordable housing space, so it's a broad space in the sense that we do have what we call social housing, we do have what we call like low cost housing, and then we do also have now affordable housing, so to speak. And they've been clustered that way because it's also based on sort of like income bracket. So there's one whereby if you earn up to 20K, you'd fall under one category, 20 to 50 you'd fall under a different category.
Yeah.
Then above 50,000 and above, you'd fall also under a different category.
Yeah.
And they're all sort of like solutions to each. So the thing is, like in a nutshell, what can be agreed on is affordable does not necessarily mean it needs to be substandard.
Yeah.
Quality still needs to be delivered, regardless of whether it's a 1 million house or a 3 million shilling house. Quality, because workmanship is workmanship, frankly speaking.
Yeah.
The only thing that, as you all know, in real estate, what would make a property like really, really expensive would be obviously this cost of land. That is a factor of location.
Yes.
Then there's also like choice of materials.
Yeah.
So if you go for really high end finishes, your construction cost per square meter is going to be high.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. But that does not mean that even if you're having like screed on the floor or you're having like simple tiling, it needs to be bad. Like tiling does not need to be,
some corners.
Yeah,
like,
you're grouting.
like that?
Yeah, even exactly. Even workmanship in terms of like putting things like grouting on the tile, it can still be done even in an affordable housing and done to really good standards. So for some reason, people always think like because it's affordable, it has to be substandard. No, it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
And we have so many skilled workers who have actually been trained and who can actually do a very good job, both men and women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You bring in a very good aspect of, looking at affordable housing, mainly what you've described from a public sector view, but also generally what is affordable. But now my question is, and I would think somebody would want to know, what are the initiatives between the two sectors, the public sector and the private sector, and how is affordable defined?
Yeah.
How is it defined in both?
Yeah.
In both spaces, in the public and in the private sector.
You see, both the public sector and the private sector ideally need to work together to ensure that affordable housing is actually, comes to fruition. just going back to your question with regards to what ideally is the definition of affordable housing. So globally, what has been accepted as like sort of like an ideal definition would be whereby if an individual is able to allocate 30% of their resources towards housing, then that is what would fit within an affordable house. So an example would be, let's say, for example, if you're earning 50,000, right? And so 30% of that would be 15. So allocating 15,000 towards your housing needs. So be it now, that would be like a rent that you're paying, or let's say, for example, if you're on a rent to own or like a long-term payment plan. So around that. So anywhere 30, but anywhere between 30 to 40% would be now the globally accepted definition of what is affordable. However, like I mentioned earlier, there's a difference. There's difference between what would be affordable vis-a-vis low cost and social housing, because the other ones, so on the affordable side, it's more of the private sector in collaboration with the public sector. Because when it comes to, say, for example, things like access to affordable mortgages, that's on the public sector side, where we've talked about KMRC before. So they'd be able to extend a certain facility, affordable home loans to you for over a long-term period, and then you'd be able to benefit from that. But then particularly if you're going to buy a unit, it will be from, let's say, private developers. When it comes to low cost and social housing, that's purely being supplied by the government. And we've seen the talks around doing that through what we call a tenant purchase scheme, whereby if you are able to access a unit, be it a single room, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, whichever, then you'd be making now affordable monthly repayments over a prescribed period of time. So how I look at it is on the low cost and the social housing side, the government has a major role to play. On the affordable side, it's a combination of both. Financing obviously has to now ideally come from the government, or in some instances also the private sector. But then the government still has a role to play as far as an infrastructure is concerned and stuff like that.
Some incentives.
Yeah. So do you have anything to chime in on that?
Yeah. When you talk about affordable, for me as a value, I think about value. I think about what number are we talking about?
Yes.
So when you mentioned that it's 30% of somebody's income, to me, I think then it's subjective. And clearly so, because what's affordable to one person is not necessarily affordable to another
somebody
person.
else. Yeah.
But then again, I think for each person, it's important to carry out a valuation exercise. Whenever you're looking at buying property. Don't just go in and whether it's affordable or not, you need to check and see what is the value being allocated. What are you buying at the correct market value?
Actually, John, even before you continue your point, perhaps you could even pick it up from the essence of like price versus value.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Right?
Yes.
We could start from there. So you tell us what's the difference between price versus value, because ideally when units are being offered in the market, that's the asking price, right? And typically how it works is, so for clients whom we help obtain affordable home loans, so there's going to be the price. You'll pay a deposit, and then once the development is complete, if it was still under construction, then the valuers would come in. The bank, the valuers,
They give the value.
then they would conduct their own valuation.
Yes.
Which now, and in this particular case, they're representing the financier, right? But then also, and they're going to typically they give 3 values. So there's the market value, the mortgage value, and I think was it first sale or
For sale value.
You'll tell us more about that.
Yes.
Then there's also the valuer from the government for assessment of stamp duty.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can tell us more about that.
So ask a very good question, Chris. There is price and there is value. The two are related, because for somebody to establish what the value of a property is, and for this instance, I'm talking about the market value, then there's a relationship. You need to look at the prices that have transacted, that is. So there's what we call asking price. So the asking price is a price that's floated by the seller into the market, and that's how much they're asking you to pay for. to buy the real estate, whatever apartment or house that you're buying. And you can, contrary to most people, what people believe, you can give an offer. You find people who, you find that this house is being sold for 10 million. You're like, where am I going to get 10 million? You can negotiate. You can negotiate and you can buy it for 8 or whatever.
Yes.
So the value aspect comes in when we are trying to establish how much would a market participant buy that property. Somebody who's knowledgeable and somebody who has, the market information, and they're looking at it from an arm's length perspective. So they're not in any way, it's not a father selling to a son or uncles, So we're looking at a proper market participant who has the knowledge. How much should they buy that property for in an arm's length transaction? So when you have various properties that are similar to one that you're looking at, and you can tell that, with varying differences, you are able to do the minuses and the additions, and you're able to tell, okay, with all of that, this is the value of the property, and that should be what you give as your offer. The price is, what it has transacted at. But when you're talking about asking prices, then we're looking at what the landlord is or what the owner is asking for. And it's not necessarily the amount that you should pay. You can negotiate. And most people seem to not know that. You also asked about the difference between what kind of values that come up. When people come in and they're looking to buy a unit, an apartment, some real estate, sometimes they need financing because real estate is really capital intensive. And because of that, then they go to the banks. And the banks request for a valuation to be done. And they give what you call an instruction to a valuer who comes in and looks at the property and does what we've talked about, whereby they look at various properties and they establish what the value would be. But the banks also require various values. They require a market value, that is the price at which somebody should buy the property for. Then they also ask for a for sale value. So this is in the event that whoever is buying the units, for some reason they're not able to honor their mandate to pay back the bank. Then there's what you call the reserve price. There's it's a forced sale. It's not between a willing seller. The seller is not willing, they're being forced to sell. So it doesn't meet the requirements of the market value. It's not a willing buyer, willing seller kind of situation. And here the seller at this point is being required to sell so that the bank can recover their money. So this by law is stipulated at 75% of the market value. In other markets, there are other ways of trying to figure out what the for sale value would be, or what you call market value with a special assumption of for sale circumstances. And with that, they look at you're trying to sell as fast as possible. So you're not giving it proper marketing. There's no proper time for you to market the property. It's not a willing seller, so there's already that constraint. The conditions under which the property is, sometimes even the viewing is very difficult to do. Sometimes because they were not able to pay the loan, they're also not able to maintain it, to maintain the property. So other markets kind of look at it in a different way. But in Kenya, and we can't go against the law, you provide it at 75% of the value. So those are the two values that we give. There's the mortgage value, but that one is really a value to do with the bank.
So my question is, which valuation is the bank going to go with when they're extending financing to a customer?
They look at the market value, but there are 3 C's that the banks look at. They look at the credibility, character, and collateral. So collateral is the real estate bit. They also look at the individual. So all of these factors, the 3 C's determine how much they're going to lend. And they also have their own policies. So when they look at the collateral, you'll find some banks lend 90%, 80%,
of the market value.
Loan to value, yes. The loan to value ratio would probably be, and that is to their discretion because they're also looking at other factors. And collateral, that being the real estate, is only one aspect. So there's also the character of the person, where they go to see CRB and check. Are you Have you been defaulting?
Yeah.
What kind of a person are you?
Mhm.
Do you pay back your loans, Mshwari, and all of this? Because you can appear on CRB if you have an Mshwari loan
Yeah.
and that you've refused to pay.
Yeah.
So in all of these things, real estate is not only developed property. There's also the aspect of land.
Mm.
And I'm wondering what have you seen in the market between, how lands, how when it comes to land, how people are deciding to utilize their land, or how the market views land and what people do with land as real estate.
Let me jump into that and just say, I'll give like an overview of my perception before and now, and how I'm seeing people interact with this land, because land is the genesis of everything we're talking about. It is one of the few assets that we have, or any investor can have, that appreciates in value. All right. So in general, I could say it has to be strategic, and it has to be generational. Generational in a way that if it's going to grow in value, then that's generational in nature in terms of the value incentive it's going to give in terms of wealth. So the perception about just acquiring land goes beyond the land itself. You have to question its income generating capacity. Is it legacy aligned? I would not sit here. I've never thought of ideally being in, like northeastern areas, but then land could be affordable to me, and this is why you just asked me about social media. There are a lot of people amplifying demand for cheap land, but then you need to align what you're buying with you as a person, because it has to be strategic and generational at the same time. All right. So for me, I would say anyone out there looking for land, we always say location, location, location. Yeah. But the deeper meaning of location, 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 is it serving your needs? Is it income generating? And also what I just previously mentioned, is it a legacy aligned? Because if it's not serving those three things, then you leave them. Yeah. For developers, they are just coming in to generate income and out. Have they gone out to check the demand to know this is a product that is receptive to the current existing gap? If I'm looking for like a piece of land to serve my personal needs, is it serving the purpose that I want? Could be farming, settling, So you just don't buy blindly just because someone is saying there are plots for 100,000. I have 100,000. In fact, I was listening to someone talking about how people buy without thinking. Your friends have bought, and then you feel like you're left out. But I always say it's like a relationship. You need to sit down and ask yourself questions before you jump in real estate.
But what are your views on speculation? Because it's worked for some people, in terms of like what you're saying. So you do not necessarily have plans for it, but you know the area, you've seen it, maybe you've had one or two things, maybe even have insider info in terms of in the next 5 years, because you also have to be forward thinking, in the next 5 years is going to be a road or a railway or whatever passing by here. And then is that...
I get where you're coming from, and that's why I've said, is the land serving a purpose? It could be you're buying just for speculation. Yeah. Speculation could be the purpose. I see. You get it? Yeah. So that's.
I have very strong opinions about speculation. It's not an investment strategy.
Amen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
I mean, you buy land, it sits there, and you hope that it's appreciates by 5 times. So and there was something that I was looking at, and one of the places that has a lot of demand when it comes to land has been in Nanyuki. So I had a very interesting chat with a client whereby they had bought land about 10 years ago
in Nanyuki.
and they had been told
there is an airstrip in Nanyuki. In fact, from Nairobi to Nanyuki will now be 30 minutes. And not even that.
Via air?
Yeah,
Oh,
via air.
Okay. Because there's like which road there?
Via air.
Yeah.
And the road is very nice actually. They've done the road that we have seen.
Yeah.
They were also told that so there's the road, there's air, and then there's there's the travel by flight, and then now there's the train.
Okay.
There's a train that comes. That means that people who want to escape from Nairobi will be coming. Kind of sold it like the way the SGR does. So it so happened when I went to see the property, I decided to travel by air because it was something that I needed to do really quick, fast, and get back to Nairobi on the same day.
Yeah.
And I got onto a flight, and we kept stopping. I went to the Mara. I went to Samburu. We stopped like 3 stops within Samburu. Like it's like a bus. By the time I was getting to Nanyuki,
what?
Yes, by the time I was
shocking.
getting to Nanyuki, it was 4 hours later, including my drive from home to the airport where you have to be there 1 hour before, so that you sit in a flight and you go stopping. And I was like, if I just got into my car and I drove to Nanyuki, I'd have been there.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a scam. So when they were
Exactly.
telling me, it's a scam.
And that's why,
Yeah.
let me just say, social media is amplifying demand with the wrong marketing content, in my honest opinion.
Okay. I'm curious to know, so what
Eventually, I had to break it to the client. I'm sorry, but your property is not what you think it's worth. They brought up the story about the train, and I found out that the train only goes once a week if you're lucky, and it's a good train.
Wow.
Wow. So, like all of that was marketed to them, and it's somewhere in the middle of nowhere. In fact, when I was on site, I could see zebras and gazelles.
What?
Yeah.
Maybe they thought of the how big is it?
It was quite a good chunk of land. I don't
Maybe
know
they
how
thought
big
about
it
like
was, but, yeah.
they do like holiday homes or sell it or
But
Yeah, but that concept is being sold very much in these areas, and there's nothing happening in the area. You go for miles before you get to the property, and there's nothing. So they asked, okay, what can we do with the land? Can you put a hospital? I'm like, who can there? Like there are zebras for for crying out loud.
yeah.
You can imagine the next where homes are, people who actually need medical facilities.
Yeah.
They are very far away from that site. Do we put a commercial building? Who will go to that office? Okay.
Have they been there to see? Ask those questions.
No, that's the thing. They bought with what you're saying. When they bought the property, they did not do the proper due diligence that needed to be done, so that somebody can say, okay, this is the marketing that you're getting. That people will be going to this area because there's a flight that goes there, and it's 45 minutes. But that's a direct flight, and because there are not really many people who are going to Nanyuki by flight, you find that they'll pick other people from Samburu, so you keep stopping in other areas until you get to it's the last stop.
I think with your story, I'm picking up something very strongly that I've been recommending to anyone buying. Honestly, I feel it's a high time. Anyone out there looking to buy in real estate, they need a professional in our field to guide them in terms of what's possible, in terms of investing, rental growth, value growth of the area. Because at the end of the day, we buy a story someone has built to market to package and sell. But then there's what is happening. We're in a market where value is determined by market forces.
Exactly.
We are the only people who can, break that down to people to understand this is not the right place to buy. And if I tell you to buy here and not here, I'll give you reasons why. So I think it's good that we are highlighting this to people to just know that, especially the guys in the diaspora, if you're buying property, just make sure that you have a realtor or a registered estate agent who understands the market dynamics.
And remember to ask pertinent questions. Like, what is the highest investment you can buy this property?
But you guys even know that?
They don't even know.
Actually, in layman languages,
Yeah.
what can I do?
What can I do? Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
What kind of developments are
Yeah.
coming up around that
Yeah.
area that can support whatever you're saying?
Yeah.
Do a market study, a feasibility study.
But then the challenge always is, it's always a catch-22 in the sense that, so ideally, clients should ask those questions, and sometimes they do. Maybe not in using those professional terms,
Of course.
but they do.
Yeah.
But then the thing is, you see, if you come to Lucy and I or yourself, and you say, okay, what's the highest and best use? There's also going to be a cost element to it. So now that part, no one wants to pay for that part. Yeah.
It
So-
will save you
so-
so much more money. In the
Exactly.
future. You have to see it from that perspective.
So if it's somebody who's buying like now maybe those plots which are being marketed, and let's say a quarter of an acre is going for 250,000 or 350,000, they're not seeing how they're going to pay X amount so that they can get a professional opinion
For 250.
for 250k or 350k. You see how, right? So obviously in elements where it's millions and millions that are likely to, that be pumped in, then there you can see how. But even in those cases, let me tell you, like those clients still want to pay. It's ridiculous. Like, yet they'll still want that professional opinion. So I'm of the opinion that it's never a question of whether they value the professional opinion. They do, because even then they understand, it's a capital intensive affair. The challenge usually is, okay, it's capital intensive, but I also want or seek these professional services, but I want it at the least cost. I want the best of the services, but I want it at the least cost. So these two obviously have to match. Like if you'd like an expert opinion, an expert professional opinion, then you also need to be willing to pay for it. So yeah. Sometimes I think there are two properties. There's one in, I don't know if it's in Kitisuru, and then the other one is in Runda. Sorry? Where am I? No. It's because I've seen them just from, I don't even know who the owners are, but I've seen them in the market. So there's one in Kitisuru. I think it's going for 350 million. And then
What is it?
beautiful. Yeah, oh my gosh, beautiful house.
Uh-huh.
I think it's in the market for a year plus. Then there's another one in Runda going for 250 million. Grand. So sometimes I usually wonder, when somebody comes up with a concept and they do something like that and they build something grand, massive, beautiful, because if you look at the market, you also have to look at the takers, the likely takers, right?
Yes.
And obviously somebody who's going to buy that kind of a property, this is obviously a high net worth individual. And we do have, of course, quite a number of them here. But then even them, they're very savvy with their money. You get? So I'm usually like, who was the target? I usually ask myself, who was the target customer? Was it somebody who's supposed to be like somebody from Hollywood to come and buy a property here? Or like, I don't understand, because you've done something so grand. It's priced at 350 million. No doubt about the architecture, beautiful home, but then it's in the market for 2 years, being advertised left, right, and center. Every other agent has it, but then it's just not moving. And the other thing that I've also come to realize is the agents in the market who would outrightly tell you this is not the way to go, or this is just overpriced. They never touch.
They don't touch.
You don't see them
Yeah.
touching those
Yeah.
properties.
Yeah.
It will always be, the ones who are,
Yeah.
I don't want to get,
Yes.
I've seen those kind of houses that are built to very specific tastes of certain individuals. You find somebody will want to build a house that's about 40,000 square feet. That's a massive house.
Yeah.
And when you go inside, you find it's like 3 bedrooms. Only
Yeah.
3 or 4. Yeah. Yeah. They're there. I've seen them. Even me, I was like,
But
now
they
when
put
they
it
go
in the
and borrow,
market.
yeah, now maybe the reason, the question is, why is it in the market?
The market, yeah, because it's
Why is
one
it in the
thing.
market?
Yeah, it's one thing to because I've seen even like a villa with a 2-bedroom. Yeah, I know, Kabete somewhere. But now when you put it in the market,
That's the
and
that's the
actively
bigger
selling.
question.
Yeah.
Why is it in the market? Lucy, I have seen you in the mentorship space. You have been doing an amazing job, a commendable job, getting young people together who have no qualification and getting to teach them how to do this job professionally. Yeah. So my question is, in this mentorship space, what would you tell a young woman who is looking to join, the profession? What are some of the maybe 3 or 4 things that you'd like to tell
a young woman in that space?
That's a really good question. You have said a lot of people who come without qualification, but they have one thing in common. They are passionate about the industry. You know, that's where everything starts. We all find ourselves pushing harder in things that we are very passionate about. So I commend them for that. All right. Now, I have just one thing that carries quite a number, like 2 or 3 things under it. But if you master that one thing, you're good to go. And it's positioning. Yeah. Positioning is everything in real estate. And how do you position yourself? You could lack qualification. Start from wherever you are. Because personally, I think we've gained the experience that we have from the ground. So any woman out there, I would say just start from where you are, you know? And then part of that journey of starting where you are is you're passionate about everything. But start learning the business beyond the property. Because that's what is real, like what we're doing.
Yeah.
We are learning the business beyond the property itself. So I've met quite a number of mentees who ideally they're just selling what they've been told to sell. But then as a realtor, or if you're in this business, you need to ask yourself the why behind that business. So you can understand who do you match make this property with, the profile of the buyer or the tenant. That is now positioning yourself to learn, because you can't pour from an empty cup. How are you going to approach a client and talk real estate and you don't know? Yeah, you don't have the facts, you know? So that's one. And I would also say, as you're getting to learn this business, voice out yourself in meetings, in clients' communication, because that's what commands your position in whatever you're doing. And if ideally, I think that has been my journey. And lately, I think 2-3 weeks ago, I had a webinar and we're just talking about positioning and branding. What a lot of guys are doing, they are branding themselves without positioning. But positioning, it's where you do conversion. But branding, you attract. So if you brand yourself and you're unable to convert, you lose credibility.
Those two should go together.
Yeah, but positioning comes first.
Okay.
Because you need to pour and reach yourself. So when you're positioning, or rather you're branding yourself, I'm the go-to person in affordable, you're guarded and you're ready to guide people. You can't go on social media. When people come to you, I want to buy, then you run to your mentor, can you help me? I have a client.
Yeah.
You're losing business. Because the next thing, they will not come to you, they will go to where
Directly to.
Exactly.
Yeah, welcome
And
to.
that is why I say positioning is everything. If you position yourself, and now also one of the best things that you can ever do if you get into this game, the long-term game is relationship card.
Definitely.
That's a real capital that you need to invest in. It's not about the money.
That's a very fantastic way to just close this podcast for today, session today. I think it's very inspiring that, you know, I kept thinking, we had an RICS campus conference a few weeks ago, and we were just talking to the students, and they're in a very good position. I mean, if in this day and age, because we never had those people to mentor you, to tell you what happens, tell you what other sectors in real estate, you just don't become a valuer or an agent, or, you know, there are very many other things that you can do in this space. And getting somebody to hold your hand to show you, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that they did. This has been Lucy, Joanne, and Christabel. Until next time, keep your dreams big, your heels high, and your real estate investments even higher.
Bye.